In 1922, a woman walked into a doctor's office with a terrible toothache. The doctor brushed it off as nothing serious and handed her some aspirin. A few weeks later, she came back and the pain was worse. Her jaw had swollen. A large abscess had formed. When the doctor touched it, it fell off. Not a tooth, her entire lower jaw. 2 weeks later, she was dead. Her bones were glowing in the dark and nobody wanted to talk about it because someone was making a lot of money. This wasn't a horror movie. This was the result of working a real job, one that promised good pay, and ended in slow-motion radiation death. This is the story of the Radium Girls, the women who made the world glow at the cost of their life. In the early 1900s, radium was magic. Marie Curie had just won 2 Nobel Prizes for discovering its strange glow. It sparkled, it healed, and most importantly, it sold. So companies put it in everything: toothpaste, chocolate, skin cream. There were even glowing condoms. Pharmacy shelves were packed with products labeled sunshine in a bottle. Tonics like Radithor, which was a radioactive water, were marketed as miracle cures. It promised to boost energy, improve sex drive, ease arthritis, and restore youth. Athletes drank it, aristocrats swore by it, and Pittsburgh millionaire Eben Byers, he was hooked. He downed over 1,400 bottles. He said it made him feel strong, until his teeth fell out. Eventually, his jaw also rotted away. But long before Eben Byers ever took a sip of radium, the real moneymaker was already in production. The biggest cash cow came from glow-in-the-dark watch dials. These watches were essential gear for soldiers in the muddy trenches of World War I, where checking the time should not require a flashlight. The company manufacturing these watches hired a lot of young girls and women to paint the watches with radium. Women everywhere lined up for the job. The pay was great. The work was delicate and feminine. They were taught to shape the brush with their lips, then dip it in glowing radium to paint the dials, and then repeat that process hundreds of times a day. When they asked,
"Is it safe?"
the response from management was always,
"Oh, don't be silly. It's safe, and you will even shine at night."
and they weren't joking. At dances, their dresses shimmered. They painted their nails with it, and they even painted their teeth with radium. It was beautiful, until it wasn't. The girls started feeling the physical effects. Toothaches, fatigue, a sore knee that wouldn't heal, then teeth fell out. Gums bled nonstop, bones broke from the inside, and no one wanted to admit that the reason was the radium. Molly Magia, her jaw disintegrated, but her death certificate? Syphilis, because no one wanted to admit the truth. Other women collapsed. One snapped her femur just standing. Some had holes open in their skulls. They were rotting from the inside out. And the worst part? The company knew. United States Radium Corporation did their own studies. While they were teaching the female dial painters to put radium directly in their mouths, the male chemists all had protective gear. They knew that radium was dangerous. They chose profits over lives. When deaths began, the executives launched a PR campaign. They blamed the women, called them hysterical. Accusing Maggie of having an STD was simply a way to discredit her. Meanwhile, all of the doctors were paid off. All of the autopsies were blocked. And the press stayed silent. But one woman refused to be ignored. Grace Fryer stepped forward. She had worked at U.S. Radium for 4 years. Now her spine was collapsing. She wore a steel brace just to stand. Doctors gave her 1 year. Grace searched for a lawyer, but no one would take the case. Fighting a patriotic giant in the 1920s was almost impossible. 2 years passed, and finally, she found a firm brave enough. In 1927, Grace and 4 others sued. They couldn't even walk into court. They testified from wheelchairs. The newspapers called them the living dead women. U.S. Radium responded, predictably, deny, delay, discredit. They hired experts who claimed the girls were lying. But photos of glowing, skeletal women hit the front pages. The public sentiment had changed. The people were on the women's side. One judge called it the most heartless thing he had ever seen. Under pressure, U.S. Radium settled. Each woman got $10,000, which is equal to about $170,000 today. The firm also covered medical costs and gave them a tiny pension. They won. But it was far too late for them. Most of them died within a year. But their fight changed everything. The Radium Girls case set new legal precedents on worker safety and corporate liability. It laid the groundwork for the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. It helped shape laws across the United States and Europe. It showed just how far companies were willing to go in the name of capitalism, and that it was necessary to create laws to prevent this. But the story didn't end with the lawsuit. The settlement forced the U.S. Radium Corporation to shut down its factory in New Jersey, but the company itself stayed alive. They just moved, rebranded, and kept making the same luminous products for decades. In the 1930s, girls in Ottawa, Illinois, were still painting dials. Same paint, same lies. Later on, more women sued the new company. Catherine Donahue had to testify from her deathbed. The judge came to her home, but she could barely speak. But after years of the case being dragged out, she finally won, just before dying in 1938. And the company? They kept fighting, until they went bankrupt, leaving dozens of women to die with nothing. Radium is sneaky. It mimics calcium, so your body stores it in your bones. There, it sits forever, emitting radiation that breaks DNA, kills marrow, causes cancer. Some women had levels more than 1,000 times the normal levels. Their bones, still radioactive to this day. 100 years later, they're still glowing. Because of them, workplaces now require safety gear. Toxic materials must be labeled. Employers must be held accountable. The idea that employees have the right to know what they're working with comes from these cases. They changed science. They changed labor law. They changed what safety means. They were told it was harmless, told to smile, to trust, to be grateful. But they were poisoned, lied to, left to die quietly. They didn't. They stood when they couldn't walk. They spoke when their jaws were wired shut. They fought, even as they were dying. And they won, and got death in return. But their pain rewrote the rules. Every workplace safety sign, every labeled bottle, every worker with a mask or gloves, it's because they said no when the world told them to stay silent. They were never supposed to be remembered, but now they're glowing in history forever. They started painting dials in 1917, and they kept painting through lawsuits, deaths, and denials until the company finally went bankrupt in 1940. By then, dozens of women had died, and hundreds more were suffering from radiation-related illnesses. But even after the original company collapsed, radium watch production continued. From the 1940s through the 1960s, dial painting carried on, especially in places like Ottawa, Illinois. This time, companies used stricter safety measures: gloves, masks, and ventilation. It helped, but it wasn't perfect. Some later workers still showed signs of radiation damage, but no deaths on the scale of the original Radium Girls were ever recorded again. By the late 1970s, radium was finally phased out, replaced by safer alternatives like tritium and promethium-147. There would never be radium deaths again, all thanks to the Radium Girls.